talk into it like that.
There you go.
Because I can be heard without a microphone, I can tell you that.
Well, put it up, look.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. 55 years ago, a young fellow from Philadelphia got on a boat with 3,000 of his best friends and sailed to the Orient. When he got there, he was there 4 days, and he witnessed the most horrific crash and explosion in naval history in the second half of the 20th century on the USS Forrestal. Our David's here to talk to you about that. He's going to tell you what he saw. He's going to tell you what he heard. And thinking about it for 55 years, he's going to tell you how he felt about it then and how he feels about it now. In order to give you some background, my job is to just simply set the stage for him. If you're a big picture person like I am, you want to start this story at the beginning. And this story starts in September of 1940. And you're saying, oh my God, 1940. Well, I'm going to get through 27 years in about 6 minutes. In 1940, in September, the Japanese invaded what we now call Vietnam. In those days, it was, can you hear me, John? In those days, it was referred to as French Indochina, with Laos and Cambodia. The Japanese invaded because they wanted rice, they wanted rubber, and they wanted the coal, which they mined in what we now call North Vietnam. Vietnam was occupied and administered by the French, but these weren't your de Gaulle French. These were the Vichy French, and I just asked Steve Hamilton if he knew who the Vichy French were. Does anybody here remember the Vichy French from high school? These were bad guys. These were guys who ran the French government under the auspices of Adolf Hitler. They had made a deal with Hitler after Hitler invaded France. The Vichy got the bottom part of France, but they got all the colonies. The Free French were banished mostly to Britain. The French were allies of the Japanese, of the Nazis, and the Nazis were allies of the Japs. So you have a very strange situation. If you were a white European colonist and the Japanese came to your island in 1940, you were in some deep doo-doo. But the Japs and the French got along fine. And that's the way things lasted for almost 4 years. On March the 28th, 1945, the entire world had changed from 1940. And what had happened there, the handwriting was on the wall for the French. The Americans had invaded the Philippines. The Vichy government collapsed when the Americans invaded France. We were about 4 days away from the invasion of Okinawa. And the Japanese knew that they could be next. The Japanese did not trust the French, so they had a coup d'etat. They knocked the French out. They killed a couple of them, and they sent the rest of them to prison camps. There was no government in Vietnam at that point. 5 months later, the shoe was on the other foot. The bombs had dropped, the atomic bombs had dropped in Japan, and the emperor on August the 15th told his worldwide forces, no more fighting, ceasefire, let's just await the surrender. There was a gap, there was a hole in the lineup. There was nobody administering Vietnam. The French were all locked up and the Japanese were just standing there, armed and ready to fight, but nobody to have fights with. The British landed, but just before the British landed, Ho Chi Minh, who became famous for all of us who grew up in those days, he established the People's Democratic Republic of Vietnam, and he occupied the government in Saigon and Hanoi. His communist regime lasted for 20 days, and the British landed and put him out. The British fought with the communists, and they killed a lot of them, and then a month or so later, in September, the French landed. At that point, Ho Chi Minh decided to negotiate with the French to get his share of the pie, but he wasn't acting in good faith, as the communists did not do in those days. He was there to see if he could get some inroads with the French in order to take over the whole country. That was his goal, and it remained his goal. The French weren't having any of it. In April of 1946, the Viet Cong, the Viet Minh, and the communists started fighting guerrilla warfare against the French. That lasted for almost 10 years. The French were finally driven out, and they were driven out for military guys and gals in the strangest way possible. They made the classic rookie mistake. They set up a stronghold in northwest Vietnam, way up in the north by the Chinese border. And they fortified the stronghold, but the stronghold was in a valley. And the Viet Cong put their troops and their artillery on the hills around the valley while the French sat at the bottom of the valley. This place was called Dien Bien Phu. The French made a lot of serious mistakes. In addition to doing this, they thought that they could supply 12,000 guys with trucks, but the trucks couldn't come there because the roads were owned by the Viet Cong. Airplanes couldn't go there because the Viet Cong would shoot them down, but they didn't have very many airplanes, and they didn't have big ones. The biggest plane they had was a C-47 to carry supplies for 12,000 guys. And the biggest miscalculation they made was if things got bad, Eisenhower in the United States would bail them out with air power. Eisenhower said no. Dien Bien Phu lasted 8 weeks, and it collapsed. The French lost 12,000 prisoners, and of those 12,000 prisoners went into the communist captivity. Only 3,000 of them came back. At that point, the French sued for peace, and they conjured up one of these Geneva Conventions. All of the nations that had any interest, including Mother Russia, the Soviet Union, the Chinese, all of them were present. The decision was made that they would simply take Vietnam, just like they had in Korea, and cut it in half at the 17th parallel north latitude. The northern part, of course, would go to the communists. The bottom part would be a republic. The southern Vietnam, the South Vietnam people decided on a series of elections. They put in a series of corrupt and fairly useless warlords. The first one, and the longest lasting, was a guy by the name of No Dien Diem, D-I-E-M was his last name. He lasted for 7, 8 years. He was assassinated 3 weeks before John Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. After that, it was chaos. One dictator after the next, they would be knocked off in a coup, and then somebody else would take over. At this time, the communists, of course, were fighting the entire time and charging. They resumed their warfare against the Republic of Vietnam in South Vietnam, and started with little baby terror attacks, villages, outposts, police stations, ambushes on the road. By 1964, the situation was in very bad shape. America, of course, was, as you can expect, sending advisors, sending guns, and sending money. Wasn't doing any good. They were going backwards the entire time. By January 1965, President Johnson's advisors told him that Vietnam was going to collapse, and it would be any day now. His options were to double down or get out. He chose, for a lot of you who remember this, he chose to double down. In 1965, on March the 8th, the 9th Marines from Okinawa, a regiment from Okinawa, landed at Da Nang Air Base with all their guns and all their trash. They were not there to guard the base. They were there to chase the Viet Cong in the weeds. Within weeks of this, March and April of 1965, thousands of Army soldiers arrived in the farther south, down around Saigon, and they would go to fight the Viet Cong in places like Dalat and Pleiku and places like that. This continued, as you know, for 6 or 7 years. An important part of this was that the Department of Defense had cranked up something which they called Operation Rolling Thunder. For the first time, American forces would attack North Vietnam. They had never done that before. It was hands off the North Vietnamese. But they decided we're going to go all the way and attack North Vietnam. This occurred in 2 different ways. The Air Force was tasked to send their heavy bombers, B-52s, and older fighter planes to bomb North Vietnam, mostly from bases in Thailand. There were some in Vietnam, but mostly bases in Thailand. The Navy had a choice. They don't have any B-52s or huge heavy bombers. So they had a choice to either fly from the ground at Da Nang and Chu Lai, places like that, or they could fly from their carriers. For good reasons, they picked flying from the carriers. This led to the establishment of something called Yankee Station. And Yankee Station was a spot in the middle of the South China Sea at 17 degrees north latitude, 17 degrees 30 minutes, I think, about 90 or 100 miles off the coast of Vietnam, right where Dong Ha is, where the Qua Viet River flows into the South China Sea. They would put, at any given time, 3 aircraft carriers there, and each of these aircraft carriers carried generally as many as 85 or 90 aircraft. They would launch offensive missions against the North Vietnamese. Navy aircraft at the time were focused on relatively low level, relatively high speed attacks against specific point targets, where the pilot, in almost every case, could see the target. The Air Force flew at 30,000 feet and dropped bombs. God only knows where they went. Some of them went to South Vietnam, North Vietnam. But the Navy had this job, and it was an extremely dangerous job. These carriers would get on Yankee Station. They would float in a great big circle, 10 or 15-mile circle around the point on the compass, and they would launch these airplanes, 80, 90 at a time. Out they would go. 2 shifts, day shift 12 hours, night shift for 12 hours, and then the third carrier was overlapping those with operations. It was a very, very busy, very scary place. The pilots who went over North Vietnam, of course, had to face surface-to-air missiles. They had to face flak, which is anti-aircraft fire. They had bad weather, and they had MiGs, Russian airplanes, flown by North Vietnamese, Chinese, or even Russians in some cases. So these youngsters would go out there and put up with all this, come back, and then try and catch the wire on one of these carriers. In the summer of 1967, David's ship got the word that they were going to go to Yankee Station. A carrier known as the USS Bonhomme Richard, known in the naval service as the Bonnie Dick. The Bonnie Dick was going to come off Yankee Station, and David was going to replace him. He's going to tell you the rest of the story.
Well, welcome and thanks for coming. This is just the journey that, for the USS Forrestal. We started there in the United States. Our first stop was at the equator. The second stop, Rio de Janeiro, went around the Cape of Good Hope and up to Vietnam. Up to Vietnam. No, USS. This is the USS Forrestal. It was named after James Forrestal, who was the Secretary of the Navy and the first Secretary of Defense. And then that was the FID, first in defense was the carrier. The carrier is almost 1,100 feet long, 250 foot wide, and 4 acres of U.S. sovereign soil floating around. Took on 85, 90 planes. It's got the ship's company is about 3,500 sailors, which I was one of the ship's company. And the air wing, when we deployed, the air wing would fly on, and they're about 1,500 people. So we have roughly about 5,500 sailors floating around here. It's a great ship. I lived and worked underneath the island. I was an electronics technician. I handled the repairs of all the communications transmitters. Well, this is the typical sailor. I got this out of a magazine. I just finished Iceland. I was stationed a year in the Great Lakes going to school for electronics technician. Then I spent a year in Iceland, and here I'm home on leave, getting ready to head to Norfolk to join the USS Forrestal. So the first thing they do before they deploy is they have a family day cruise, and naturally we did the same thing. I got on this ship a couple of days before the family day cruise. I had no idea. There are no stairs and no hallways on these ships. Everything is ladders. Now, when I mean ladders, I mean ladders. And you got to come down them the front way. There's no going down this way, and they throw your ass off. You got to learn how to do it. Next way. This is on the family day cruise. I got my picture taken here. Going through the passageway, you can see it's not that big of an area, and they call them shin busters. I said there are no hallways. On the family day cruise, with my parents being in the hangar bay, down in the hangar bay, and right, I said I lived underneath the island there, and that was the 03 level. It took me 2 sets of weights to get down. I fell down those ladders twice. I had to get back up and get chains so I could get back down. So I really wasn't a swabby at the time. I was a joke, and I had to be on there for a while. But I got the hang of it after a while. But here we are. We're on our way to Vietnam. And the ship always travels with a couple destroyers, a couple of escorts. You need them for flight ops, for search and rescue, in case there's any other little ships during wartime that try to knock us out. But again, one thing, the USS Forrestal at this time was the biggest, meanest, mother-humping ship on the 7 seas. There was not another ship any bigger, had more firepower than this one. We were the big boys on the block. So this was, they sent us over there because they were really going to start bombing China and everything else. So we were on our way. Now, on the way, like I said, we stopped at the equator. A ritual for the sailors when you cross the equator, you go through a big ritual. If you haven't been across the equator, you are a pollywog. And I am sure that all you people are polywogs, unless you're in the Navy and cross the equator. Now, out of the 5,500 guys, give or take a couple guys on the ship, out of the 5,500 guys, there was a couple hundred that had already been across the equator. They were already shellbacks. So the captain came over to loudspeaker, the 1MC, the intercom system, and said that if we capture all these 300 guys, we don't have to go through the ritual. So luckily, everybody in my division, we were all polywogs. But there was a bunch of guys. There was total close to 300 that had already been across the equator. So they were the shellbacks. So they said, if you can round them up, we won't have to go through this initiation. So they did. They rounded them up, and this is what 2 of them looked like after we rounded them up. And they rounded them up. So now, after we rounded them up, they said, all you have to do now is go up on the flight deck and get your card. It says, a little business card that says you are now a shellback. Yeah, sure, just go up there. There you go, you got 5,000 guys up on that flight deck. Of course, the ship's dead in the water, but it was a mess. But I got my card, so now we went to bed, and then we got alarmed. This is the Neptunus Rex and his court, and we pissed him off. So now he says, what you did to my shellbacks was a no-no. So now I want everybody, you have to wear your clothes on inside out, and we will come and get you. You stay in your berthing area, wherever you're supposed to be, and we will come and get you, starting for breakfast. So we did. So you can see there's another sailor that I got out of a magazine. That shirt's on backwards, pants are on backwards, and they're even inside out. That was the other part. So we got called up. We went down to the mess decks, and you grab your tray, and you're going through. The eggs are now red. Potatoes are blue. Whatever else, the sausage could have been pink. I mean, it was just, nobody ate anything. So you just took your tray, went to the scullery, dumped it in, threw the tray, and we had to go back up to our station, back up to our part. Now we're going to come and get you one at a time. We're going to come and get your division one at a time, and you're going to go through the ritual. So I got a lot of pictures. I didn't want to take up all the time here, but how it starts out was they come and get you, and if you start mouthing off, they go, oh, you're the wise guy. All right, so now they put a couple X's on your head, you know, whatever, so you're a troublemaker. So now they come and get you. You're walking in, following in, you know, marching in, put you down on the elevator in the hangar bay, bring you up from the hangar bay. And now these guys are all dressed like pirates. They're the shellbacks. They now control the ship. These 300 guys, and I don't care whether you're an officer, if you're the top guy or the low guy, I'm in charge. And I don't care who you are. And they didn't. So these guys were mouthing off. So he got a little problem there. And this guy mouthed off a little bit too, because he's in a lock. And you don't even want to know what happened to him. But anyhow, all the food that you did not eat,
Right.
which was all of it, we had to go through that.
Oh.
We had to go through that. After we went through, the first thing was the cold water, ice water, and you had to jump in that, and the other shellbacks are looking around. You came out of that, then you went through what you didn't eat. And then after you went through what you didn't eat, then you had to go through the shillelagh lines. Now the lines, all the guys, the shellbacks, they all had fire hoses that were cut. So now you're going through there and they're just whacking your tush. Like you're going through like to beat the band. You're running through there as fast as you can. And then when you got done that, then you had to go to see the king in the court. And this is what you wound up with. This is the fattest guy there that had the sheet on for a diaper, and you had to kiss this guy's belly. So you kissed the belly, and when he went to kiss the belly, you grabbed your head and like this. So you wound up with.
Oh, God.
Now, when you get done that, when you're going through the shillelagh line there, they got the fire hoses on you to make sure you don't run off the ship. You know, you don't fall off the ship. But when you're finished with this, you are a mess, a total mess. Well, there was, you know, at the time, a couple hundred at a time, guys walking around. You just took your clothes off and threw them overboard. And you got a couple hundred naked guys walking around with shoes on, waiting to get up to your berthing area to get dressed again. But it was just a lot of fun. The guys were, you know, but some guys were wise guys. You know, they got it. They got the worst because they had clippers. So you're the wise guy. Alex was the wise guy. So guess what? You just got half of an Elmer Fudd. No, and the next day we're going into Rio de Janeiro for 2 days R&R. So you're going in and look like Elmer Fudd. So here we go. We started up again from the equator, and we headed down towards Rio de Janeiro, which we stopped. And I got changed. I took my bathing suit. I got changed at a Texaco gas station. And this is Ipanema Beach, Copacabana. Wow. And I'm a world traveler, almost as much as Flaherty. But you know, and this is the Christ of the Andes. Now, I don't care who you are. I don't care what religion you are. When this is at nighttime, it's like that. If the hair doesn't stand on the back of your head, something is wrong. I got that on my knee, and I said, I'm sorry, I stole that car. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to. Please, you know. So then we spent a couple of days in Rio de Janeiro. It was great. We can't. We're too big. We can't dock. You have to take Liberty launches in back and forth and things like that. But it was a great time. And then we left Rio de Janeiro, and we headed south. Now we're going around Cape Good Hope. We're going around. The swells are so big that it's just unbelievable. This is a destroyer. The carriers have to refuel the destroyers when there are no tankers around. we have to refuel. We are in a refueling mode right now. We're in this refueling mode. We're refueling this destroyer. Now you can see this black line here. That's usually underwater. That's the water line for the ship. So the gray part is really what's out of the water, supposedly most of the time. Right there, it's got to be probably 25, 30 foot. And then you have the gun mounts. They're another 10, 12 foot high. That's how far he's out of the water. You see the gun mount? You see the gun mount there? You don't see that ship anymore. That ship is long gone. That's underwater. See the gun mount? There's the gun mount. That ship, all that is underwater. The gun mount's going down. The gun mount's going down. The gun mount's going down. I'm taking these pictures with an all Instamatic camera. No more gun mount. The gun mount is underwater. And I'm laughing because when you're refueling, the officer of the day has to be out on the bridge. And every time this destroyer went underwater, which is, you can back up and you go back down. When it went back down, it broke, the waves broke over that gun mount and went up and drenched the officer of the day on that destroyer. Well, when they started coming back up, a little steward came out, gave him a towel, he wiped his face. He went back in, closed the door. Here we go again. Down, back down. Boom! This guy get whacked again. So, this was like a Keystone Cops adventure. And then when we were coming back, we got refueled by a British tanker. And that was another Keystone Cops adventure. But like I said, I don't want to take up all this stuff. But, all right, next. All right, now let's get into the serious stuff. The other stuff was all fun and games. Took us 67 days to get from Norfolk, Virginia to Yankee Station to get online. We started our first strikes against North Vietnam on July 25th. For 4 days, we were super. We were flying the best we could. In the 4 days, we flew over 300 sorties. A sortie is one plane loaded up with bombs or ammunition, whatever. That's a sortie. We flew over 300 of them, 300 of those within 4 days, in the fourth day. At nighttime, you get the supply ship, which was called the Diamond Head, the ammo ship that came around. And he started loading us up with these bombs. And I'm just going from the book here, but I definitely want to read you something once we get started. Okay. We'll get that in a second. But just to show you here, when we get started here, this is the flight ops. These are flight ops. This is the guy, he's got a yellow shirt on. The most dangerous place you ever want to work is the flight deck of a carrier. You could get blown off, you could get sucked in, you could get the arresting gear could wipe you out if it broke. When the planes come in, they're coming in at over 100 miles an hour, about $1.25. They stop within 2 seconds. You're going 125 miles an hour and you're stopping in 2 seconds when you hit that arresting gear. This guy here is the one sending it off. He's sending one off on this other catapult. There's 4 catapults on the carrier. 4 catapults and 4 elevators. But he's in the yellow shirt. And then they have a guy, a landing safety officer, that he waves the flags. He lets you know whether you're able to land the plane or not. If you don't like the way you're coming in, you're going back out again. And the one thing I forgot to mention is, I don't know, can you put that first one back? Or I could just, put the carrier back up on there. Yeah. This was the first ship built with an angle deck on it. This and you can see the line. You can see the lines are on a slant. That's an angle deck. It's the first ship. This is the first attack carrier built, the Forrestal. They made 4 ships like this called the Forrestal class, and it was the Forrestal, the Saratoga, the Ranger, and the Independence. The Saratoga and the Forrestal were on the East Coast. The Ranger and the Independence was on the West Coast. But these are the first ones built with an angle deck on it. When you fly into the plane, when you fly into this, you come in on an angle. You don't come in straight in. So that if you miss, there's 4 arresting gears, 4 wires going across. When you come in, you hit the arresting gear, and that stops the plane within 2 seconds. You're done. You went from 130 miles an hour, 120 miles an hour to 0 in 2 seconds. And then he backs up a little bit, lifts the hook up, and then he pulls forward. The old carriers didn't have the angle deck. They were just straight through. So when you landed the guy, and he would come forward, the next one would land, they'd have to put up a net to make sure that if he missed the arresting gear, he would go into the net and not crash into the other planes. But this is the first one built from the angle deck, from the keel up with an angle deck on it. So all the planes come in, you come in on an angle. You don't come in straight, you come in on the angle. So if you miss, you go bing, bing, you go right back out again. And the different planes we had on there, we had these vigilantes. They were the reconnaissance planes, but they were big and cumbersome. They were like, you ever see that cartoon? I'm bringing home the baby bumblebee. Well, that's what they were like. These planes would come in, they'd miss the arresting gear half the time. Bam, they go right back out again. Have to start all over. But yeah, I forgot to mention about the angle deck on there. Oh yeah, just a little bit of trivia here. Just a little bit of trivia. This was commissioned in 1955, and the first captain of this was Captain Ronald Johnson. It was decommissioned in 1993. The captain of the ship at the time, taking it out of service, was Captain Ronald Johnson Jr.
Wow. How about that?
Father took it out.
Amazing.
Kid brought it in. Just a little bit of
Very cool.
yeah. Just
Wow.
so now we're in Vietnam. They gave us these World War II bombs. They were built in 1935. They've been sitting out in the Philippines in an open Quonset hut since World War II. So, the ordnance officer said, "What are we doing with these?" He said, "Well, this is the bombs." We weren't really in a war. We were in a conflict. We didn't have enough bombs to go around at all. None of the ships did. We didn't know that. I didn't know that at the time. But anyhow, we got these World War II bombs. They're 1,000-pound bombs. 1,000-pound bombs. When they went off, when the fire started, this is taken from the Oriskany, the other carrier. This is 10 miles away. It's 10 miles away. Well, this one, 1 minute and 34 seconds. That's all it took. I'm getting blind, going blind. 1 minute and 34 seconds into the fire, the 1,000-pound bomb from John McCain's plane exploded with a fury not felt on the deck of a U.S. aircraft carrier since World War II. This is the biggest catastrophe that has happened since World War II. All those years, this is it. This is the number one. The detonation of a 1,000-pound bomb on an armor-plated aircraft carrier deck is nearly unbelievable, with an unbelievable force. At that moment, the bomb's high explosive is converted almost instantaneously into a gas at a very high pressure and temperature. The pressure causes the metal casing to fragment, and the surrounding air is compressed into a shock wave that feels like an atmospheric pressure of 200 times or more. The temperature in such a blast can be 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The blast of this weapon, designed to take out huge numbers of ground troops and fortified installations. We got these bombs delivered to our ship.
David, tell them how it's started.
I will in a second. Okay. Next ready? Yeah. Okay. Now, yeah, everybody, just be quiet. This is about a 4-minute video about the fire. Now, just remember, 1 minute and 34 seconds.
The time is 13:51 and counting. There, on deck. Somehow a Zuni rocket has been triggered, roaring across the flight deck and hitting an A-4 Skyhawk. A sheet of flame from the A-4's ruptured fuel tank has enveloped the Skyhawk and her immediate neighbors. Behind that curtain of smoke, 2 1,000-pound bombs have already dropped from her wings onto the burning deck. Here, almost at mid-screen, we see a crash crew chief moving toward the flames with a Purple K fire extinguisher. His only thought, the trapped pilots in those planes.
Fire! 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 Fire on a flight deck! Fire on a flight deck! All hands, man your battle station! All hands, man your battle station!
In order to control the fire, the captain orders the Forrestal to slow speed. Back on the flight deck, with precious seconds ticking away, things have started to go wrong. Fire has completely blanketed the stern fire main loop, making its plugs inaccessible, and the next to the last loop aft has developed pump trouble. The only alternative is to haul hoses aft from the forward stations. And this takes time, precious time. 13:52 and 43 seconds. The 2 main fire parties are now on deck working close to the flames, but so far only 1 hose is actually operating. The first explosion carries a message. The Forrestal is in deep trouble. It won't end here. The chain has started. Yet those who have survived it turn around and head back. There are buddies back there, and the chief with the Purple K is dead. A fire at sea is the ultimate nightmare for any sailor. You can't run away from it. There's nowhere to go. It's a fight for survival. Your instincts have to be right. Your courage pinned on like a badge. Following the 3rd explosion, the first 2 fire parties had been virtually wiped out. The fire was not completely out of control. A great ship was on the verge of dying. To save her, other men were going to have to go back on deck, most of them without sufficient training in firefighting techniques. Down below, fuel was pouring through holes in the flight deck caused by the continuous 1,000-pound bomb explosions. The fire had chased after the fuel, spreading quickly to the O3, O2, and O1 gallery decks and into the after end of Hangar Bay 3. Topside, the only hope was that the explosions would somehow subside. Until they did, no firefighting team could possibly survive on deck. In all, during the fire's first 5 minutes, 9 major explosions would take place on the flight deck. As the first of the injured were brought to safety in a sponson area, another relief party was already forming up. They knew what they needed most on deck, the foam hoses. For some unknown reason, one or more of the fog foam stations hadn't been initially charged. Some of the firefighters either didn't know that it was necessary to perform certain manual functions on the flight deck and hangar decks to get the foam systems operating, or they were injured or killed before they got to them. On deck, the relief party's first move was to lay down a curtain of foam between the flames and the Forrestal's island. Once this buffer zone was established, some of the damaged planes could be moved to safety. Along the port side, where most of the armed aircraft were parked, things were still out of control.
How this started, how this all started. We had already launched the morning sorties, and we're getting ready to launch the afternoon ones at 11 o'clock. Well, at 10:52 is when all this happened. This is the culprit right here. That's a Zuni rocket. The worst part about it is there was only 3 planes that had Zuni rockets on it in all 4 days. That's it. Just 3 planes. How it went off is when you're launching all these aircraft, you got to launch them like this. Everybody's when they're making a strike, you have to do all 20 planes at one time. You can't have one guy go and then, well, it took this guy 5 minutes to go up the aircraft carrier, so he's 5 minutes late and the rest of that stuff. You all got to be there at the same time. So they want you off in a hurry. The whole trick is to get those planes off. When you have the bombs, it's no big deal. But these rockets, you have a safety. You have to be safety. There's 2 safety things. One is a pin. There's a pin in there. Nothing can happen as long as that pin is in. The other one is they need the electrical charge to set that rocket off. So you have a pigtail. You put the pigtail in, and then you pull the pin out. Where do you do that? When it's on the catapult. Does that happen? No. Because it would take too long to go around all these rockets. Put the pigtail in, take the pin out, take the pin. So the flight crew decided, we'll just do all this ahead of time. So they're all lined up on the back of the ship. They put the pigtail in, and they pulled the pin. So they're all ready to go. There's no more safety for these Zuni rockets. How it got started was that to start these planes, you're all on external power. They have a little cart that goes around, little car goes around, and they start all the planes. So you're on external power. When the plane gets started, then they take the power off. Well, when that happened, there was a surge in electrical power. That shot the rocket off. Now, can you put the carrier back up? The main one. Well, that's good. This one's okay. Yeah, put the other one back up. Yeah, all right. Now all these planes are lined up on the fantail of the ship, all around like this. The Zuni rocket was on the Phantom, was on an F4, and that shot across the flight deck and hit an A4. It was really it was John McCain's plane. Back then he was just a hotshot pilot. But it went across and hit his plane. The Zuni rocket hit his fuel tank, exploded the fuel tank, fuel went everywhere, and the fire started. 1 minute and 30, and those 2 bombs, like they said in the little video there, his 2 bombs, John McCain's plane, 2 bombs had already dropped. They dropped off the plane and they're on the deck. Well, guess what? 1 minute and 34 seconds later, those bombs exploded. The one that exploded, within 5 minutes, 9 of those bombs exploded. guys were flying through the air just from the pressure and stuff. The people that were able to fight the fire, and the part of the ordnance guys, they were dead within seconds. They had no idea we even would hit them. Now you have 5,000 guys up there that have no idea how to fight a fire. Well, today, everybody in the Navy has to learn how to fight the fire. The chief that went up with the fire extinguisher, his name is Ferrier. They named the fire school after him. Every carrier now, everybody in the Navy has to know how to fight a fire. And all the carriers now are fitted out with sprinkler systems of foam and everything on the flight deck. So this was the Zuni rocket. You can see the guys trying to throw him overboard. This guy pushing about a 250-pound bomb. They're rolling them off. A couple of pilots, they couldn't get out of their plane. They went over the side. Next. These are just pictures of double color pictures. I mean, this was unbelievable. Guys just carrying. There's a lot of bad stories. This is the back. This is on the port side of the ship. That's where the bombs exploded and everything. That's where McCain's plane was. Well, when they hit the general quarter station, my general quarter station, because I was in charge, I was already forward on the port side of the ship. So when you're running on the ship, you run up and forward on the starboard side of the ship. You run down and aft on the port side of the ship. So as I'm running up the passageway and going through those shin busters like you saw in the beginning there, and those bombs started going off, I'm saying to myself, who the hell is bombing us? We have more firepower than anything on the seas. And here was, I didn't know, it was our own bombs. I thought it was maybe a couple of these little side pan things came up and started lobbing some bombs. But it was our own bombs. So, I said, holy smokes, we're getting, and back here, it's the radar from the destroyer. He was so close, they were putting water on us, trying to put the fires out. We were taking on so much water that the bombs, this is the port side of that ship. That's the port side of that ship. Those bombs even exploded. We had holes below the water line. We're taking in water. We're taking in water. Besides the destroyers putting water, helping us out. Well, the ship started listing. And I'm thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, I'm on this big thing here. I didn't think about ever drowning out here. But when this ship started listing, I said, oh, Jesus Christ, if we tip over, I'm done, because I'm on the port side and we're tipping that way. Well, the damage control guy, the guy in charge of the fuel and everything, smart guy, pushed all the fuel to back over to the starboard side. Put us back up, but it takes a while to come back up. I mean, it doesn't do it in a couple seconds. Believe me, I was shaking in my boots there for a while. But that's all it is. These are all just different photos of. Again, there's the destroyers. They're dumping water on us. We thought we had the fires all out, but we were going into Subic Bay 3 days later, and we're still fighting fires down below. And one, I can't even tell you that story. But the good story is that this guy's girlfriend sent him a letter. It was a penny postage due. He went down to the post office to pay that penny postage because he was on the night shift. And where those guys were sleeping, the flight deck is their ceiling. Those bombs went off, killed everybody in that,
Wow.
except for him. I hope he married that girl. I hope he married her.
That's a story.
But, and then, we're
That's terrible.
just passing off the bodies here. We lost 134 guys died, 161 were injured. And it was all because McNamara and Johnson didn't want to lose face. We didn't have enough bombs, and we had World War II bombs that weren't heat treated. If they would have been heat treated, we could have had that fire under control, and we wouldn't have lost anybody, maybe one or two, but we wouldn't have lost 134 guys. So, but now the Captain Beeling, the guy who was the captain of the ship, they tried to nail him, but they did all kinds of investigations and everything, and they knew it wasn't his fault. It was the Navy's fault. Wasn't our fault. Wasn't his fault. He got through 3 or 4 investigations, and he was cleared of everything, and they had a change of command. The guys at the top were all air guys who were pilots and stuff like that. Admiral Moore, he was the pilot. So they stuck together, and they couldn't do anything to Beeling anyhow. I mean, it wasn't his fault. But then they had a change of command, and this guy, the other guy came in who was a black shoe. He was a regular sailor, like me at the time, wasn't in here. And he gave him a lot of problems, and so Beeling wound up, he thought he was going to go back out on another carrier, and but he didn't. He wound up in Iceland. They made him an admiral, but he wound up finishing his career in Iceland. But it was a beautiful ship. I enjoyed every minute, well, except for July 29th, 1967. But any questions?
Where was your general quarters?
My general quarter station was always, my general quarter station, because I go back, first one. There's that handsome guy again. My general quarter station was always forwarded in the command center. I was in there with all the big wigs. And I lived and worked out underneath the island. That's where all the transmitters were. Because of the superstructure here, all the antennas, all these antennas, they're down during flight ups. They were all mine. They were on both sides. But anything that had to do with communications, through planes, through anything, that's what we took care of. But I was all the way up here. And the ship started listening this way, because they were all the water was going on in the back end. All the fire was back here, all back there. And it was starting to go over. I go, whoa,
Dave,
whoa.
did you go back under your own power, or did they have to tell you?
No, we run our own power. Here's the bad story. Everything's controlled from the bridge up there. They have below the water line on the port side and the starboard side, they have steering rooms. In case something goes wrong, that you can't steer the ship from up on the bridge, you steer it from both sides. Well, when you were working on the bridge, when you weren't working on the bridge, you were in the hole. You were on the steering hole. And it's not a big compartment, but you're in there. So the one guy, Bob Sheldon, he didn't like working on the bridge, because you worked up on the bridge up here. Guess what? You got to be in a nice uniform. You're up there with all the brass and yes sir, no sir, and the rest of that. Yeah, Jim Blakis, he liked being in the hole. So it was actually Sheldon's turn to go in the hole, and Blakis was supposed to go up on the bridge. And Blakis said, "Look, how about letting me go down in the hole? You look like you're ready to go on the bridge anyhow. Why don't you go on the bridge, and I'll go in the hole." He went in the hole. They never got out. There's 3 of them in there, him and 2 electricians. The damage was so bad and the fire was so bad that nobody could get to him. And at the last minute, the executive officer, the executive officer, got him on the phone and said, "You have to transfer the use over to the starboard side." And they just did it, and as soon as they did it, then all 3 of them, they were burnt. They were drowning. They didn't make it. They just luckily got it transferred over. I don't know about Bob Sheldon, knowing that he should have been in there and not Jimmy. You know, I mean, enough as it is.
Did they repair the ship?
Yeah, they did. They did. They repaired it, and it was actually a great ship. I mean, they won a lot of awards and everything like that. We came back, and we were going to make a med cruise. And I've been to the top of the world, the bottom, 3/4 of the way around the back again. And the only place I haven't been is to the med. So I said, well, I'm going to ship over. I'm having a good time, you know. And I was making rate real fast, so yeah, let's go to the med. So we got back in, got all fixed up. We ready to go to the med. I get a letter from my mother, and then that letter was acceptance letter to Penn State. I said, whoa, how did that happen? I didn't send anything. God bless you, mothers. God bless you, mothers. So I had to go back to Lieutenant Zerflu. I had to tell him, say, Commander, I'm not shipping over. Because he knew I was going to ship over. You had to make the med cruise. So I got out, and they went down to Gitmo for carrier quals. I got down there for war games outside of Guantanamo Bay. And so instead of shipping me back, they went down in April, and I was getting out in May, so they let me out in May. They let me out in April. I got out a little early, but so I didn't make the med cruise. I didn't get to the road to Spain or anything. You know.
Hey Dave, was John McCain in his plane when the rocket hit his plane?
Yes, it was. John McCain was in his plane, and he got out. He was able to get out, and on some of the films that we've seen, you can see him jumping off the wing, and he actually went back in to help get the guy on the plane next to him. Yeah, nobody cared. Everybody was just trying to help the other guy. That's all. That's what he did, you know. But and then we came back. We didn't come back with anything. We just came back on our own. No destroyers, no nothing. We just, we flew all the planes off that we could. The front catapults were still okay, so we flew some of the planes off. We went into the Philippines, and we had holes in the flight deck big enough you could drive a triaxle dump truck through. That's how big they were. And we made it back. We got it all fixed up and we're ready to go. Any questions? Yeah, please.
So were all the fatalities buried at sea?
I'm sorry.
Was everybody buried at sea?
No. Some of them were. We brought most of them. We brought most of them back. A lot of them we gave to the repose. We gave to the hospital ship. You know, and they took care of it.
Dave, I don't know whether it's true or not, but I always believed that if Kennedy had not been assassinated, he would not have been in Vietnam.
I don't know. I was only 19 years old. So I joined when I was 17. I wasn't into that. I was, into girls and playing ball. I really wasn't,
Well, then tell us about the girl from England.
Yeah, the girl from Ipanema. Yeah, I wish. But, yes, sir.
Do you remember your training for firefighting? I do.
I don't, because I don't remember doing firefighting. If I did, it was probably only a day and at boot camp, and I don't remember.
That's all we did.
I didn't go to firefighting school. Maybe because you were a minesweeper, maybe they made you go. You gotta be crazy. But
Firefighting, they had a concrete building,
Yeah.
all concrete,
You put
with
a
a
gas
doorway.
mask on. Yeah.
Inside the building was a grate, just an open grate.
Right.
Under the grate was fuel oil. They lit that. So you come up to this doorway with flames shooting out of the doorway. You have a hose over your shoulder, and you're supposed to sweep like this and beat the flames back from the doorway. Then you get inside, and you're supposed to sweep the floor to put out the fire.
well, those guys are learning that now. They all have to go. They all have to go to firefighting school. And like I said, they named that firefighting school after Chief Ferrier, the guy that went up with the, with the fire extinguisher.
Is there any support, organized support for the sailors who just went through this, or
you dealing with this on your own?
Well,
I mean, do you have people to talk to, or you just dealt with it yourself?
I just dealt with myself. I didn't talk to anybody. I'm talking to you guys right now. That's it. You guys. Anything else? If not, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Most of the stuff in this book called Sailors to the End. And this guy, Gregory Freeman, wrote this book. I'm not really a reader, but I've read this book, and it's an easy read. There's a lot of information in here, a lot about the ship, a lot about the war. If you want to know something about it, I really recommend you getting this book. It's called Sailors to the End. And that was after those two guys in here. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Saratoga was the same place.